Man, I am seeing God build out our Charis Bible College so that we can accommodate at least 2,500 students. And in order to do that, we need student housing, and so we now are actually building student housing. We've got 2 dorms that we're hoping to finish before the start of the next school year. And if we had more money, we could actually get more done. Right now, we're spending about $1.6 million per month on construction, and that's in addition to everything else we're doing. It takes $7 to $8 million a month just to maintain all of the outreaches that we have, television and all of the things that we're doing. And we need more money, and we cannot ask our students to supply all of this money. I forget exactly what the tuition is. I think it's around $5,000 per year, which is relatively cheap compared to most colleges. But if we were to have them pay for the hundreds of millions of dollars it's going to take to build out this facility, we'd have to charge them each $500,000 per year. We couldn't do it. Nobody would come. So we need people to stand with us. And I know that there's many of you that have watched this program for years. You've been blessed. You've never been a partner. You've never contributed, and that's fine. I love you. I'm glad to minister to you, but we are in a deal now where we need people to help us. And I'm asking you that if you've been blessed and if you want to help bless other people and raise up people, soldiers, that'll go into this battle against this woke culture that we're dealing with, I'd ask you to go to awmi.net/campus and look at this flyover that we have. And there's a place there you can join with us and become a foundation builder. That's awmi.net/campus.
Welcome to the Canadian edition of Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, celebrating 55 years of ministry.
Teachings that you have invested in me has produced healing and relationship with God in my life. So I'm just eternally grateful to you and to your ministry.
And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Friday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. I'm nearing the end of this is the end of my 9th week of teaching through this little booklet, 20 Revelations that will change your life. And yesterday we just finished up with Revelation number 18. So I'm drawing to an end. This coming Friday, a week from today, will be my last day to offer this little booklet as our free gift. And I tell you, this has been powerful. As it says, this is just 20 of the most important revelations that God has ever shown me, and it has transformed my life, and I know it would do the same thing for you. And so I was talking this week about the second most important encounter I think I've ever had with the Lord was January the 31st, 2002, where He spoke to me from Psalms chapter 78 and in verse 41, where it says, "Yea, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel." And God told me I was limiting Him by my small thinking, and so I repented. And I had to deal with a number of things. I talked about that I was lazy and complacent where I was, that I was afraid of failure, that I felt inadequate, and most importantly, I just felt like that if I was to really see growth and success, and if God prospered me, that it'd go to my head and I'd get in pride. And I've learned that God resists the proud, and pride goes before destruction, and I didn't want that. And so God had to deal with me in those things. And since then, I've talked a lot this week about the transformation from 21 years ago when God first spoke this to me and to where we are now. And it's just amazing what God has done. What I want to talk about now, and I'm going to continue this into next week, I'm going to be talking about your imagination. And I have a book on this entitled The Power of Imagination. And this is a 180-page book. And this is really, really powerful. So as God told me that I was limiting Him, I had to start thinking bigger. So how do you think bigger? And you know what? God led me through a number of things, but all of these things kind of culminated or came together in teaching me about your imagination and how to use your imagination. Let me turn over and use this passage, Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3. "Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee." We use that scripture a lot, and many people have heard that, but if you look the word for mind up in the concordance, it's the Hebrew word yetzer, Y-E-T-S-E-R, and that word literally means conception. So your mind is where you conceive things, and that exact same word, Y-E-T-S-E-R, is also translated imagination about 4 or 5 times in the Old Testament. For instance, in Genesis chapter 6, where the Lord says that the imagination of man's heart was only evil continually. And so this word yetzer is used to refer to your imagination. And putting these things together, the word yetzer means conception. I believe that it is in your imagination where you conceive things. Now this is really important. And the Lord began to start speaking to me that I knew what God's will for my life was. God wanted me to be in ministry, and He wanted me to touch people all around the world. But I hadn't allowed myself to imagine that coming to pass. If you would have asked me, what is God's will for your life? I would have told you. If you would have said, to what extent? I would have said, I'm supposed to be ministering to people all over the world. But you know what? I hadn't allowed myself to see it. And this is something that a lot of Christians, I don't think, utilize their imagination the way they should. If you were to ask the average Christian about imagination, they would kind of have some resistance towards it because they would look at imagination as being fantasy. Well, I admit that fantasy is part of the imagination. You know, having a mouse that talks, having a dog, Pluto that talks, and all of these kind of things, that's imagination, and that's fantasy to a lot of people. I'm not talking about that. If you go to a dictionary and look up a definition of imagination, it just means your ability to see something that isn't real or isn't present. You use your imagination constantly, and I'm not talking about the fantasy part of it, but you use your imagination all of the time. You use your imagination to go home. You know, if you were at work right now and then you got off work and it was time to go home, you would use your imagination to get home. You use your imagination to find your car, where your car is parked. You know, if I was to ask you, if we were together, say you came to my place and you were in our conference and stuff, and I say, so where did you park? You may not be able to tell me the exact parking spot, but you know if it's in our parking garage or if it's out in the parking lot that's in front of our building or the parking lot that is on the side of our building or something. You have an idea. You can see, you can picture where that car is. And that's your imagination. Did you know if I was to ask you how many doors do you have in your house at home? Most of you haven't sat down and counted your doors unless you've had to replace them or paint them or do something like that. But if I was to ask you how many doors do you have, you could tell me because you could look at them in your imagination. Did you know when you go shopping, you use imagination because you go to the same store and you know how they lay it out, that the fruits and the vegetables is over on one side and these things are in another, and you know kind of where they are. Jamie and I were going shopping in the UK one time, and we were looking for a bottle of water. And did you know that in the UK they lay things out differently than they do the grocery stores at home? And I mean, it took us 30 minutes to find a bottle of water in this large store because everything was arranged differently. We had it in our imagination where it should have been, and it wasn't there. They did things differently. So my point that I'm making is, some people think, well, I'm just dealing in reality. I don't use my imagination. You use your imagination every single day of your life. If I was to ask you for directions and say, how do you get from where you are to the airport or something like that, you would say things like, well, you go out here and you turn left or right, and then you go down and there's 1, 2, 3 lights, and you make a right, and on the corner there will be this building. You aren't seeing those things with your physical eyes. That's all your imagination. Your imagination is what allows you to remember things. You can't remember without an imagination. And man, that's a deadly thing. That's basically what Alzheimer's is. And people that have Alzheimer's, I mean, it just totally destroys your life. You can't function without a memory. You can't function without an imagination. So anyway, I've got a lot more detail in this book, and I'd encourage you to go into that, but I've just said those things real briefly to say that one of the things that God showed me, how I was limiting Him, I had never sat down and just imagined me doing what God called me to do. And it was the reasons that I've already dealt with this week. I felt inadequate, and part of it is I just couldn't see myself ministering to people worldwide. I just didn't feel like I was able to do that. And I had to get past that. I had to see myself doing those things. And you know, one of the things that happened immediately, we were in the midst of trying to find a new place to house our ministry because we were bursting at the seams and just did not have the room to accommodate things. So we were looking for a new facility. And those around me were looking at buildings that were like 20 or 30,000 square feet. And I knew it needed to be bigger than that, but I just hadn't imagined it. And so I had to spend time just sitting down and thinking, God, how big a place do we need? And I started taking the limits off, and I started dreaming big. I started going on the internet and looking at things that were for lease or rent. And we found a 110,000 square foot building. Remember that at that time we were in a 14,000 square foot building, and we went to a 110,000 square foot building. And even though it was huge relative to where we were at that time, I just started seeing that thing. I just allowed myself, I took the limits off, and I started seeing, God, how could we use this place? And when we first moved in there, it seemed like we were like a BB in a barrel. It was like we'd never fill this up. But I told people, I said, 4 or 5 years, we'll be maxed out and we'll have to get another place. And it turned out that that was exactly so. And you know, one of the things we did when we got this building was 110,000 square feet, but there was only 10,000 square feet of that entire building that had been built out and had offices in it. And the rest of the thing was a warehouse. And they did mill work for, woodwork type things. And so the whole thing had to be built out. And what I did, I got together with some builders, and we spent a number of time with architects, and we were drawing out how big an auditorium we needed, how many classrooms we needed, the toilets, all of the facilities, the office space and things. And we made a plan. And I was determined I was going to do this debt-free. And one of the things that I did, I had my builder put this tape down on the floor where every wall was, where every door was, and things like this. And I would spend an hour or 2 hours a day just walking around. This is after everybody had left and before we had moved in there, so there weren't many people just in those first 10,000 square feet. And after everybody left, I would just spend an hour or 2 every day walking around, praying and imagining that building being built. And I know that this sounds crazy to a lot of people. A lot of people look at that as fantasy, but this is how you build a vision on the inside of you. I would see those things. I actually took some 5-gallon buckets and I put them in where the stage in the auditorium was going to be, and I put plywood on top of them. And I stood on top of that plywood and I preached entire messages just like there was people in that auditorium. And there was nobody there. It was dark. It was at night. Nobody was there. And I know many people think I'm weird, but I think you're weird to have an imagination and not use it, because your imagination is where you conceive things from God. And so what I was doing, I was doing these things to help me see that place built, to see it done. And I tell you, it was a struggle at first. And at first I felt kind of strange doing it, but you know, the more I did, I got to where I was so excited. I actually looked forward to the time that I could spend just walking around. And I never stepped over that. It was duct tape is what I was trying to think of. I never stepped over that duct tape and acted like it wasn't, like a wall wasn't there. In my imagination, I was seeing those rooms and those offices and all of those things built. And I would go around and I'd act like I was opening a door, and I'd walk in and I'd look at this office and think, is this the size that I want it to be? Is this how I want this to look? And I was using my imagination. And over a period of time, it got to where that was so real on the inside of me. It's exactly like this Hebrew word, yetzer, that means conception, and it's translated imagination. I actually conceived that building. I conceived it on the inside of me, and I saw it, and I got to where it was so real on the inside of me that it couldn't have been more real if it had been finished. And did you know when we finally got that building built and we were having a dedication service for that building, other people now could see what I had been seeing for 18 months. And they could see it, and they were just shouting and praising God because we got it done debt-free. It was a $3.2 million renovation, and we did it debt-free, which may not sound like much to some people, but at that time, where we were in our ministry, the finances, it was the greatest miracle that we had ever seen. And people were just praising God, and I had a woman come up to me and says, "You don't act excited." And you know, part of that's just my personality. I'm never a real extroverted person. I don't jump real high and I don't go real low. I'm just pretty much the same all of the time. But the reason I didn't seem excited is because I had been excited about it a year before. I had been rejoicing. There was times walking around in the dark, looking at those walls that weren't there, but yet I could see them in my heart. That was so exciting to me that I had rejoiced and praised God long before. And when I saw it with my physical eyes, that was actually anticlimactic. And I know, again, some of you think I'm weird, but I think you're weird because this is the power that God has given us. Your imagination is powerful. Think of this. God came down to see the Tower of Babel that men were building. And it said that when He saw this, He says, "Now nothing that they have imagined will be restrained unto them." And because of that, God confused their languages so that they would leave off building that Tower of Babel. Think about this. God Himself and His purposes for mankind were challenged because of the unity that man had, and that nothing they had imagined would be restrained unto them. The imagination was so powerful that God had to do something to limit that imagination to keep them from thwarting His plans for them. If God is challenged by the evil imaginations of people, think how the devil's kingdom could be challenged by you using your imagination in a positive way. Imagination is a super powerful thing, and most people just haven't really utilized it. Most Christians look at imagination as being something childish, like fantasy. Let me turn over here to 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and share with you some scriptures that the Apostle Paul wrote. And he was talking about persecution here and some of the things that he had endured. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and in verse 17, he says, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." This is amazing. Man, I've got a lot of teaching on this. I could talk about this for a very long time. But notice he says, we are looking not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. The average person watching this program would say, well, if you can't see it, then how can you look at it? You can see things in your imagination. Matter of fact, again, you can't do anything in your physical body that you haven't already conceived in your imagination. You know, we've built a lot of buildings, and I'm right now in the process of dealing with architects, and we're building buildings. And what happens when you go through building something, you talk about things. And everybody is seeing something. They have a picture on the inside of what they want, but the architect's picture may not be the same as mine. So I remember actually taking a napkin and drawing out some things, but I'm not a very good artist. And so I told them, but then I drew it, and as we discussed it, we began to start getting closer and closer to seeing the same thing. And finally, they write down and put it in print. They make a blueprint. and you use that blueprint to build things from. You can't just go out and start building something. You've got to have it drawn at you. You've got to be able to see it. That's the whole purpose behind the blueprint, is so that when you say you want this, the other person is seeing the same thing. So you write it down, you both get to where you see it. You know, I built a deck on my house out in Florissant one time, and I remember that I took a bucket and just sat on that bucket, and I bet you for probably a week, I just sat and looked at how I wanted this deck to look. And I would just sit out there for 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time. Jamie came out one time and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm designing this deck." And what I was doing, and in my mind, I was just seeing this coming to pass. And I would sit there and think about it. And then eventually I saw things in my imagination that I said, this is what I want. And once I saw it on the inside, then I could do it on the outside. Man, I pray that you're tracking with me. I know that not everybody is a visionary. Not everybody thinks the way that I do. But really, you cannot do anything on the outside that you haven't already seen on the inside. This is why when you're like building something, when you're putting something together, they will give instructions, and they won't just have words, but they will also have pictures. They'll have an illustration, and they'll say it's like it is in illustration number 1. And so they'll use words. Words paint pictures. But they will also use pictures. You know, the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you see something, then you can all of a sudden do it. But if you can't see it, you can't put it together. You can't build it. And so if you're reading instructions, this is why they have those illustrations. Anyway, I'm saying all of these things to say how important your imagination is. And sad to say, most Christians have somehow or another been thought to think that it's childish to have an imagination. I just want to deal in reality. And they don't consciously use their imagination. When the Lord told me I was limiting Him by my small thinking, this is one of the major things that He told me. And I started spending lots of time just sitting and thinking and imagining things coming to pass. And man, when I started doing that, I knew that God wanted me to reach people all over the world, but I was just reaching a very small segment of people. I just got to sit down and thinking and praying and letting God inspire my imagination. God, how do I do this? How is it that you want me to get from where I am to there? And I would just pray about it and think, and then God would speak things to me, and I would see it in my imagination. And you know, I'm still doing that. We right now are in the process of building out our Charis Bible College, and I saw these dormitories. I'm the one that designed them. I thought about what do I want, and I would think about it. And I didn't want it to be just a typical college dorm where, you know, you have multiple people in a bunk and it's bland and it's sterile looking. And I sat down and imagined and saw what I want, and I finally communicated it, and we came up with plans. And then we went into designing a student activity center. And we probably talked about this 2 or 3 meetings. And I said, I just can't see it yet. And we were sitting down and discussing, and they were saying, so what do you want? And we were discussing some things, and Mike Pickett, one of my vice president of our ministry, he says, what would you think about an atrium in the center of the thing? And when he said that and spent just a few words describing it, I said, that's it. That's what I was missing. I wanted something like that. And all of a sudden, all of the things that I'd been thinking about what we needed in that building, I just saw it on the inside. I don't know how to tell you that, but I saw it in my heart. And once I saw it, then I communicated it to the architects, and now we're going ahead and they're actually designing that building right now. But I had to see it on the inside before I could build it. This is something that every one of us deals with. You have an imagination, and it's underutilized with most people. We need to get to where we start using our imagination to see what God has called us to do coming to pass. And sad to say, most people will see failure, they will see criticism, they'll see all of these things, but we need to start seeing success. And I'm going to be talking about how to use your imagination in a positive way. Again, I'm giving away this little booklet free of charge. We also have teaching that were taken directly from our television program. And then I have this book that goes into much more detail on the power of imagination, unlocking your ability to receive from God. I tell you, this will really, really help you. You aren't going to hear very much teaching on this, so I'd encourage you to get it. If you'll listen, our announcer will give you all the information about how you can receive these materials. And so listen, and then please call or write today.
Andrew is offering his booklet, 20 Revelations That Will Change Your Life, as his free gift to you today. This booklet is limited to one free booklet per household and is available in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Contact us today to receive your free booklet. Andrew's complete series, 20 Revelations That Will Change Your Life, is available in a CD or TV DVD album and as a USB made from our daily television broadcast. Each of these valuable resources is available when you contact us. This entire series is also available for audio download, absolutely free from our website. Also on today's broadcast, Andrew mentioned his teaching, The Power of Imagination. This teaching is available when you contact us. Go to our website at awmc.ca and click on Today's TV Offer under the Store tab to see all the ways you can get these products. Also, our products and additional resources are available in various languages through our website at awmc.ca. Or you can call the Andrew Wommack Ministries Canada helpline Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time at 647-348-2220 to order.
I want to let all of you know who are watching our program in Canada that we have a Canadian office. We also have a website, awmc.ca, and you can go there and you can get all of our materials sent to you from our Canadian office. You can become a partner with us and give, and the money will stay right there to help us reach people in Canada. We would love to help you and minister to you any way we can.
To learn more about the vision and mission of Andrew Wommack Ministries Canada, be sure to visit our website at awmc.ca. While there, you'll also find details about all of the products available and be able to access many of Andrew's teachings absolutely free. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to hearing from you today.
Did you know that God created you for great things? He's placed His power and purpose inside you, and He wants to do more in your life than you can think or imagine. Get immersed in the Word of God and walk in power and purpose for a lifetime. You have an amazing purpose, and it's time to step into the life God created you to live.
A disciple is a person who continues in the Word until it sets them free.